Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. In the 1983 regular season, it seemed like nothing could stop this team right here, because Washington truly looked like one of the greatest regular season teams of all time, coming off of their Super Bowl title the year before in the strike-shortened 1982 season. They had the #1 scoring offense in football, and by a fairly comfortable margin, I must say, as not only did they score 541 points, coming out to an incredible 33.8 points per game, and not only were they the only team in the NFL to cross the 500-point mark, but they scored the most points by any team in NFL history at the time. Their point differential of plus 209 was 70 points ahead of the second-best total. They were the only team in the league to go 14-2, as they became the first team since the Pittsburgh Steelers more than half a decade prior in 1978 to win 14 games in a single season. They had 6 Pro Bowlers on the offense alone, including quarterback Joe Theismann, who was named the MVP of the league that season, and you can learn more about Theismann by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And you could honestly make the case that Washington was the most dominant team in NFL history, as from Week 14 of the 1982 season until Super Bowl 18, they won 24 out of a possible 26 games, for a winning percentage of 92.3%. It seemed like nothing, and I truly mean nothing, could possibly stop Washington. Not one opponent could do it. The only thing that could stop Washington from being dominant was some outside force and some bizarre fluke. And folks, the story we have today absolutely qualifies as that. Because at one point in 1983, Washington was so dominant that the only thing that could stop them was television. Seriously. Their greatest opponent wasn't any team they played on the field or any player that gave them fits, but rather the television network broadcasting the game. Sort of. It's a bizarre controversy that we're going to take a deep dive into today, because in 1983, Washington had a big play in a big game negated because of an error by CBS. At least, that's what the referee said. Because more than 40 years later, this is the story behind one of the strangest television controversies you're ever going to see in NFL history that you probably never heard of. Before I talk about the controversy in question, we need some context to understand the game at hand, the importance of the game, and how the game itself was going. It's September 25th, 1983. It's Week 4 of the NFL season, and we've got a big interconference matchup on our hands at the Kingdome between Washington and Seattle. It's extremely early on in the season, but this is looking like a possible Super Bowl preview nearly a quarter of the way through the year, with both Washington and Seattle sitting at 2-1. The winner of this game is above 500 at the quarter mark of the season, while the loser might be in some trouble in their respective division hunt. In the AFC West, the Los Angeles Raiders lead with a 3-0 record, so a loss by Seattle could potentially drop them to 2 back, which would be a tough deficit to climb out of, while a win could potentially have them tie for the division lead, which was especially a big deal back then, when all the division winners got a bye. And in the NFC East, Dallas leads with a 3-0 record, so a loss by Washington could potentially drop them to 2 back, while a win could potentially have them tie for the division lead. Safe to say, a lot was riding on this early season matchup, so you really can't afford any opportunities to screw up, which we'll get to that. But to start the game off, it was an extremely high back-and-forth affair that was living up to the hype. We were 5 possessions into the contest midway through the second quarter, and neither punter had even so much as stepped onto the field, as after an opening drive turnover by Seattle, there were 4 straight scoring drives. It started when John Riggins, for what felt like the 200th time already this season, found the end zone on a 1-yard touchdown run to give Washington a 7-0 lead. On the ensuing drive, the Seahawks drove down the field before having to settle for 3, as Norm Johnson hit the 27-yard field goal to get Seattle on the board for the first time today. Washington responds with a 64-yard touchdown pass by Joe Theismann to Charlie Brown, giving them a 2-possession lead by a score of 14-3. But the Seahawks, needing to respond, go on a 5-minute drive down the field, and after Jim Zorn hits Steve Largent for a 13-yard touchdown on third down, the score is 14-10. Time for Washington to get the ball back on the ensuing kickoff. And that is where things get absolutely bizarre. Because back there to receive this kickoff for Washington, after they allowed 2 straight scores, was this man right here. None other than Mike Nelms. Washington had a surplus of talent throughout the 1980s, and Nelms was one of those players. By this point, Nelms had established himself as quite possibly the best return man in all of football. Despite getting drafted by the Buffalo Bills in the 7th round of the 1977 NFL Draft, he never played a down in the NFL until 1980 with Washington, but he immediately made an impact on special teams. For his efforts as a return man, he was named a Pro Bowler in 3 straight seasons from 1980 to 1982, as well as an AP second-team All-Pro throughout each of those seasons. He would eventually be named an AP first-team All-Pro in 1983, and would eventually make it onto the Hall of Fame All-1980s team for his special teams contributions. You give Nelms any sort of breathing room, whether it's on a kickoff or a punt, and he's going to make you pay. And Seattle was about to find that lesson out the hard way, because with the Seahawks trailing 14-10, they kicked it to Nelms. And what followed is a kickoff that, in the grand scheme of things, should have been inconsequential, but more than 40 years later, deserves a deep dive. Because that's when this happens. Roll the tape.
14-10. Johnson kicks it off to Mike Nelms. He's going to try it from 3 yards deep. Can he go? 40-yard line. 43-yard kickoff return by Mike Nelms. He was tackled by Eric Lane, number 37.
By God, Mike Nelms did it again. Just like that, Washington has the ball right around Seattle's 40-yard line, with fantastic field position to strike yet again and extend their lead even further. Nelms was already averaging 27 yards per kickoff return before this game, and this return was only going to boost his average even more. Except for the fact that it didn't count. For some bizarre reason, this kickoff return did not count. And it was not because of a holding penalty or a block in the back penalty, and it was not because Washington lined up offside, and it was not because Nelms called for a fair catch or something like that. Rather, after the kickoff return, the referees huddled up and announced this.
What's going to happen?
TV came back on. The official blew the ball dead. No kickoff. Re-kick.
That's right. The reason the kickoff return didn't count? Television. The reason that this kick would have to be done over, and the reason that now Washington was starting at their own 22-yard line and not by the 40, which is a huge difference, was because CBS was not ready. They were not back in time from the commercial. And because the network had to be back so that viewers at home can see the play did not count. Which is bizarre, because as you could clearly tell based on the fact that you were able to watch this all unfold, CBS was absolutely back. And it wasn't as though they broke into coverage in the middle of the kickoff. They were back for an awfully long time. In fact, if you were watching the game, there was nothing abrupt about the transition. Watch the network come back from commercial break, and if I didn't say anything, you wouldn't even think twice about what happened.
Now the Redskins know how the opponents feel in RFK Stadium. There's Largent who caught the touchdown pass, number 80. Number of plays, Seattle 32, Washington only 10, but Washington has the lead 14-10.
They showed the score. They showed a shot of the sideline. They showed the Seahawks lining up to kick off. Kicker Norm Johnson hadn't even started his run or come close to it. This looks like a completely normal play, and for some reason, the referees thought that CBS wasn't back in time, even though they clearly were. Naturally, play-by-play man Jack Buck was confused about the whole thing, and why the referees blamed CBS for something that, at least on the surface, didn't appear to be their fault in the slightest bit. Not by a long shot. Take a listen.
Well, that wasn't our fault. We were back. That wasn't our fault. We were back here in plenty of time. We gave you the kicker. We gave you the deep man. We gave you the score. And one of the officials blew the whistle inadvertently. And as a result of that, they're going to have to kick it back once again. Isn't that something?
Yeah, and they blame us.
Heck, we were back for a long time. The referee said we weren't ready. He's nuts. We were ready. I don't mean he's nuts.
I think you do, yeah.
Which raises the obvious question. What happened? Just what the heck happened that led to this bizarre situation where the referees blew a play dead because television wasn't back in time, even though television was clearly back in time? Well, the referee didn't say anything after the game, so we don't know. All we know is that everyone involved was miffed about the whole situation. Jack Buck said, "I don't know why the referee, Fred Wyatt, blamed it on us. We were back from the break and ready to go. We were live. There must have been a mix-up between Wyatt and our guy on the sideline who coordinates TV timeouts with the game referee." And understandably, Washington head coach Joe Gibbs, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, was furious and confused about all of this. And I can't blame him at all. His men had a great play nullified for no reason at all. Said Gibbs, "I saw the CBS guy on the sideline make a motion with his hand to indicate they were ready for play. So the referee signaled them to kick off. I don't understand any of it." Gibbs continued, saying, "We saw the official give the signal for the kickoff, and we felt it was a legal kickoff." And yeah, I'd be just as confused. The referee said it was good, the network was back, everyone seemed to give the green light for play to resume, and all of a sudden, it just didn't resume, and everything was a lie? And what makes this all the more crazy is that this wasn't even the first time this happened in 1983. Heck, it wasn't even the first time this happened in 1983 during the month of September. If I had a nickel for every time a big play on a kickoff was negated because the referee ruled that television wasn't back in time in September of 1983, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Because during the opening week of the season, you might remember this play between the New York Jets and the San Diego Chargers, where the Chargers made a great play on special teams to pin the Jets deep on a kickoff. But the play was negated because NBC wasn't back in time, and as a result, a re-kick happened, which led to the Jets getting fantastic field position. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And sure enough, it happened again. I'm sure people were just thrilled with the NFL by this point. You had a strike cancel half the season and set up a complete sham of a postseason in 1982. And then to kick off 1983, you didn't even know if the plays you were watching counted, because you didn't know if television was going to interfere. Now, the good news for Washington in the game between these two teams behind me right here is the fact that, unlike the Chargers-Jets game, this kickoff did not matter in the grand scheme of things. Not in the slightest bit. Sure, Washington did not score on that drive, but they did take a 20-10 lead going into the halftime break, and they eventually won it by a final score of 27-17, improving to 3-1 in their quest to make it to the Super Bowl for the second straight season and the third time in franchise history. But still, just the fact that something like this happened in the first place is inexcusable, especially since CBS was very clearly live, and they were for a long period of time. So again, how something like this even happens in the first place, I have no clue. Like I was saying at the top of the video, Washington in 1983 was just about unstoppable during the regular season, especially when it came to moving the ball down the field. And it wasn't the Seahawks who halted their momentum and stopped their scoring onslaught during the second quarter, but rather the referees and television, due to one of the more unusual do-overs you will ever see on a bizarre mix-up. Because during Week 4 of the 1983 season, when it came to Mike Nelms, there were definitely some incompetent people at the helm. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.